the November 16th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Ms. Pinyard, please call the roll.
There we go. Got me. Chair Ron Heberlein.
Here.
Cameron Mesbah.
Here.
Jennifer Willard. Olive Gallagher. Here. Brianne Tusinski. Here. Aaron Woods. Andrew Carr.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now time to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an opportunity for visitors to address the Planning Commission on items not on the agenda. It is also the time to address items that are on the agenda but not scheduled for a public hearing. Staff and the Commission will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input before tonight's meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. Is there anyone either on Zoom or in the council chambers here that would like to provide any citizens' input?
I have attendees on Zoom, but no one is raising their hand at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, administrative matters. We've got the consideration of the September 14th, September 28th, October 12th, and October 19th meeting minutes. Does anybody have any corrections to the minutes?
We are so perfect.
Yes. All right. Hearing no corrections, the minutes are approved as distributed. All right, on to our next item. First item on the public hearing list is the Airport Good Neighbor policies, and I have to say some stuff first. Matters before the Planning Commission involve legislative public hearings. These are somewhat different than the quasi-judicial hearings conducted by the city's Development Review Board. The Planning Commission would like to hear from anyone who has testimony to offer that is relevant to the issues before the Planning Commission. If you wish to testify tonight, you need to complete a testimony card. For those who are here in person, please complete a testimony card located at the side of the room and hand it to the recorder. For members of the public participating remotely with the Zoom meeting platform, digital testimony cards are already filed with the recorder, but we ask that you please indicate now or after the presentation a desire to testify by sending a message to the recorder at City Hall using the Zoom chat function. For those people joining the meeting by phone only, you will be unmuted after the staff presentation and asked one at a time if you wish to testify. If you have not previously submitted a digital testimony card, please request one now using the Zoom chat function. Please note that testimony may also be submitted by email during the hearing by emailing the following email address: planning@ci.wilsonville.or.us. Again, that's planning@ci.wilsonville.or.us. And please confirm with the recorder through the Zoom chat option that you emailed your comments. Your email will then be read into the record. Remain in the meeting until the comments are received and read aloud. Written comment or testimony received after the public hearing has closed cannot be considered. Because your testimony gives you legal standing in the matter for which you are testifying, it is important that you provide your full name and address at the beginning of your comments, or if you prefer not to state your address aloud in the public forum, state that your address is as provided on the testimony card you submitted to make your statement. When your name is called to testify, if you are present in council chambers, please come forward to the podium and speak clearly into the microphone for the record. If you are participating in the meeting remotely using the Zoom or web platform, please wait to be unmuted by the recorder before stating your name and comments for the record. When you testify, please address your comments to the findings, criteria outlined in the staff report, and applicable regulations that city staff cite at the start of the hearing. Some of the issues that come before the Planning Commission are fairly complicated. For that reason, we especially appreciate any specific recommendations or suggestions that you may have. We will ask you to avoid redundant testimony. If you agree with the testimony that has already been given, just tell us that. If we have a large number of people interested in testifying, we may limit the time allotted to each member of the public to 3 minutes. At the end of your testimony, members of the commission may have questions for you. Thank you for taking the time to participate in the hearing tonight and help us deal with these issues. Yay. All right.
job.
Airport Good Neighbor Policies. Ms. Batechel.
Yes,
Take us
wonderful.
away.
Thank you, Chair Heberlein and members of the commission. My name is Miranda Bateshell. I'm the planning director for the city of Wilsonville. I'm here tonight to present the Airport Good Neighbor Policies project. Just as a reminder, and for those in the audience, the purpose of this project really is that the city of Wilsonville, the businesses and community members here have an interest in the airport resource that is just south of us, and in the French Prairie area. We have a distinct interest in the French Prairie farming area that's just south of the river, and the potential growth that may or may not happen at and adjacent to the airport. The city has an interest in having a voice at the table of any planning efforts that are going on, whether they be at the airport or with development adjacent to or near it. And as an affected jurisdiction, we want to have adopted policies in our comprehensive plan that help to give us direction on how to participate in those processes. The purpose of this project is also to align with the role of our comprehensive plan. We've had a lot of different discussions. Many of the issues that occur at the airport or that might occur in the master plan, planning at the airport may encompass more than what the city's jurisdiction is and what our role is with the city of Wilsonville, particularly since the airport is not within our city boundaries. And so with that, we have tried to capture the relevant interests and concerns that we heard from the public and from key stakeholders, and that we've heard from our Planning Commission and City Council in a manner and scope that's consistent with our role and that of our comprehensive plan. So we spent the past year working on this project. The project team has worked with you, members of the public, key stakeholders, and the City Council to shape the proposed policies that are in front of you this evening for a hearing. Tonight, we are seeking a recommendation to send to the City Council on this matter. And so for clarity on the hearing record, I would like to read the exhibits and attachments that will be filed with the clerk on resolution LR 22-0003. So with that resolution, you will adopt the staff report as Exhibit A with its attachments. The attachments will be Attachment 1, the actual comprehensive plan area of special concern O, both the map as well as the text amendments. Attachment 2 is just an area of special concern O context map to help show some of the other resources that are near the area O that we're adopting. Number 3 will be the Airport Good Neighbor Policies findings report. So the findings that staff have prepared to show consistency with adopted policy, both at the city, region, and state level. And then attachment 4 is the Planning Commission record for this item. And so that includes all of the relevant public involvement information and record documents over the past year of planning work. So with that, I will introduce Chris Green. He's senior planner with HHPR. You've come to get to know him well on this project. He will provide a presentation of the proposed amendments, as well as the planning process and how that got us to where we are this evening and the policies that are in front of you.
Great, thank you. And I realize that I did not do all of my chair duties, so I will do that now before the presentation starts. Okay, file number LP 22-003, Planning Commission resolution of the City of Wilsonville Planning Commission recommending the Wilsonville City Council amend the comprehensive plan text and areas of special concern map to adopt airport good neighbor policies and designate the Aurora State Airport and surrounding properties as an area of special concern. The public hearing is open at 6:12 p.m.
Do I have to repeat myself? Just this part? Okay. All right, so.
Sorry.
It's okay. I will not repeat all of my introduction. However, for the sake of the record, I think I probably need to read in the exhibits and attachments, or
or is the recorder telling me it's okay as is?
I would defer to the city attorney, of course, assistant city attorney, to dial that in.
Let's do it for the sake of the record.
Okay, so for the sake of the record, I will read this back. So I would like to read the exhibits and attachments that will be filed with the clerk with Resolution LP 22-0003. Attached to that resolution will be Exhibit A, which is the staff report and all of its attachments. Those attachments are Attachment 1, the Wilsonville Comprehensive Plan Area of Special Concern O, both the map as being adopted as well as the text amendments to the comprehensive plan. Attachment 2 will be a Area of Special Concern O context map showing additional resources that will be near the Area of Special Concern O. Attachment 3 is the Airport Good Neighbor Policies Findings Report for LP 22-0003. That shows all the findings of consistency with local, regional, and statewide policies. Attachment 4 is the Airport Good Neighbor Policies Planning Commission record that has all of the documentation for the past year of planning and all of the public meetings and input that we've received to date. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, Chris Green with HHPR, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our planning process and then the actual contents of the policies and area of special concern that you have before you. So we'll talk a little bit about the project background and context, go through community engagement again and kind of what we heard from that process, and then we'll talk about the actual proposed area of special concern and the staff recommendation. So Aurora State Airport was founded in 1943, so during World War II, transferred to the state of Oregon right after World War II. It is in unincorporated Marion County, right next to the Clackamas County boundary at the north boundary at Arndt Road.
Sorry, I just need to share your screen.
Oh, sorry.
Because it's not popping up. Sorry to, whoops.
Just a moment, sorry.
Sorry to get all of it.
Oops.
So the video you'll want to leave on.
Okay.
And then, for some reason, is this computer not joined? Give it now.
Thank you.
And then I'm just gonna start your video quick, so that you're on video. Maybe. I don't know how to can change the video. She'll do it. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. So, yeah, Aurora State Airport. So it is part of, it is operated by the state of Oregon, so it's part of Oregon Department of Aviation. There's 281 aircraft there. It's considered a Category 2 general aviation airport. This talks about the different development areas of the state, in and around the state airport. So there is the airport grounds itself, and then there's several through the fence areas that are adjacent to it are airport development areas. So those are areas where properties that are potentially airport related can use gates to get through into the airport property and use the airport facility. There's been master planning processes many times over the years. In 2018, the Department of Aviation for Oregon applied for federal funds for a runway extension. And then the current master planning process for the airport itself kicked off in late 2021. So this is a different process, but sort of helps inform the city's participation in that type of intergovernmental process, such as master planning for the airport. Just to give kind of an idea of some of the neighbors around the vicinity of the airport, you've got cities of Barlow and Aurora. Charbonneau is the closest neighborhood within Wilsonville, but as you see, the Wilsonville city limits are pretty close between that city limit at the south end of Charbonneau, and the north boundary of the Aurora Airport is about 1.6 miles. And then the French Prairie is, doesn't have a specific boundary, but it's generally that area in between. And then the airport's right at the edge of Marion and Clackamas County, as I mentioned. This is key, as Miranda mentioned, it's not within the city of Wilsonville, and it's actually just outside of the metro boundaries, but just adjacent to Clackamas County as well. So there's a lot of different cities, counties, and other jurisdictions that are all kind of in this region around the airport. Those planning processes that I mentioned, so this kind of takes a look at airport compatibility, both from the perspective of planning for airport facilities and protecting air navigation, as well as comprehensive planning and how that relates to it. So that airport planning process is driven a lot by state and federal requirements and results in an airport master plan that really gets into what happens at the airport and its operations. We are the third stage in that sequence on the right there in the flow chart. This is more related to Wilsonville's comprehensive plan and kind of implementing planning policies and goals in that area around the airport. So project goals that we started out with, clarifying how the existing airport impacts the community, recognizing the economic benefits of the airport for the region, and the big one overall, kind of the umbrella, is ensuring that City of Wilsonville has a voice in discussions about the future of the airport and ways that it could affect Wilsonville. So community engagement, there was a lot of different methods of community engagement. I tried to kind of group them here. So engaging the community, this is talking about ways that the project was publicized or that we tried to reach as many people as possible to kind of give a short response. So we got Boone's Ferry Messenger, the city webpage, and social media publicizing the process. And then the Let's Talk Wilsonville virtual engagement platform. And then connecting with stakeholders, getting a little more kind of direct feedback in a lot of ways. We had interviews with stakeholders, including firms located at the airport, different governments, farming interests, economic development organizations, to kind of get more in-depth knowledge from those that were working in and around the airport on a frequent basis. There was an online survey in February and March, so that had 100 participants. They were primarily residents of Wilsonville, and so the results of that survey, definitely the most high priority was neighborhood compatibility, surface transportation. We didn't get as much participation from outside of Wilsonville because it was, publicized specifically to the community here. And then online community conversations. So we had 2 virtual open houses. We had those at different times of day to allow folks with different schedules to attend and share feedback directly with us and hear about the project directly from staff and from the project team or myself. And then, as you know, we've been refining this at both Planning Commission and City Council. So 3 work sessions here at Planning Commission in November, April, and September, and then those were each followed by a work session with City Council. So what did we learn from the community engagement? So in the big picture, I would say there was interests and concerns that related to, aviation and those impacts. And we also found that there was a lot of interest in the land around the airport and kind of development of that area around the airport. And some of the resources that were highlighted, The noise and air pollution from flight patterns over Wilsonville, we had heard some about prior to beginning the planning process, and definitely heard from respondents about that. One thing that was, I think, a big takeaway from that was Charbonneau is the closest neighborhood, and so we kind of had an idea of there would be maybe this area where there's a part of Wilsonville that's potentially impacted, maybe a very small specific area of Wilsonville, but what we heard throughout the process from different stakeholders is there's, to varying degrees, there's impacts over a lot of different parts of Wilsonville, particularly east of I-5. So there wasn't really a good way to draw like a line across Wilsonville and say, here's where the impacts are. Water pollution in and around the Willamette River was especially of concern to some of the stakeholders near the airport, and then the city has water, it draws water from the river, and it's a recreational opportunity for the city. Loss of high-quality farmland in terms of the land was one of the biggest concerns we heard, that French Prairie is important to Wilsonville-based businesses and important to the region. We did hear some concern about impacts on industrial and employment land, that because it's right at that boundary of the metro boundary, within Wilsonville, there's areas that are regionally significant, industrial areas, employment areas, and there's been a lot of investment by the city, both in terms of money for infrastructure, planning processes, and everything to really encourage industrial development in these areas. And there was concern that you have an unincorporated area outside of the city and outside of some of those requirements, that if there was industrial development there, it could be an issue for the employment land that the city's been promoting. And then surface transportation was a big one, so concerned both about I-5, but also a lot about the network of roads that are in that area that are county roads that are pretty important for freight from farms and getting people to and from those communities in that area to the airport. So making sure that development around that area wasn't causing roadways and traffic congestion that kind of block that access. And then we heard a lot about capacity for emergency response, and there was a lot of different ideas about the degree to which Wilsonville would benefit from that, or how that benefit would take place. But it was consistent from stakeholders that that was considered a real benefit to the city to have that emergency response and access to the airport. Also for, economic development, that there was, it's something that's close by, that's easy to get to for businesses to use. As Miranda mentioned, there's, after and going through the different options for how to address this area that's, outside of the city but impacts the city, the comprehensive plan section on areas of special concern made the most sense. There's there's areas A through N already, and these allow the city to have things in their comp plan where kind of general language that citywide doesn't really apply to it, or doesn't apply specifically enough. Some of these areas were outside of the city and have since become part of the city. Some of them are still outside of the city, so there's a precedent there for looking at areas that are close to Wilsonville that impact the community, and making sure that Wilsonville's engaged in planning for those areas. So that was the reason for that path. This is the boundary that was proposed, so you will notice one change to this boundary from your work session in September. We did get comments that everything north of Arndt Road that was close to the airport was omitted in the Clackamas County side. And so this includes both Marion and Clackamas County areas. Basically, this encompasses, and I'll show the next slide, I'll actually probably illustrate this a little bit better. So you see the boundary of the airport itself, those through the fence areas, and then either one or two parcels generally away from that boundary where there's areas that may, in theory, develop or be considered for development because of their proximity to the airport, are included within the area. So that kind of shows relative to the airport where that boundary sits. So the objectives themselves, they're kind of paraphrased here, but the first one really focuses on the seat at the table for the city and engaging in master planning for the airport. The second objective talks more specifically about changes to aviation activities at the airport and making sure that impacts from aviation are something that the city has a chance to address. The third relates somewhat to that in, we had the one slide that kind of showed the two different processes of planning around airports. So federal and state agencies have pretty detailed jurisdiction over airport safety, noise requirements, things like that. And so coordinating with these agencies on noise impacts and other aviation impacts. The fourth one talks about public and private development and infrastructure projects in that area to make sure that the city's engaged with planning as projects are proposed in the area of special concern, and making sure that those are consistent with rural development patterns in the fifth objective, but also making sure that there's infrastructure and public service available for what is present out there. And then the last objective, and there was some edits to this one from feedback from Planning Commission and City Council as well, advocating to keep the general aviation and existing services that are there at the airport. This one kind of recognizes that role in terms of resilience and emergency response as well, but in a more open-ended way than the previous draft did. So I will have Miranda talk about the staff recommendation.
Wonderful, thank you. So commissioners, tonight here before you, you have the proposed policies for adoption. And the staff recommendation would be for the Planning Commission to adopt resolution number LP 22-0003, recommending adoption of the comprehensive plan amendments to adopt the area of special concern O and related airport good neighbor policies to the City Council. The City Council hearing is currently tentatively scheduled for December 5th, pending any recommendation from the Commission. So staff are happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have at this time.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for city staff regarding the report? All right, I'll do it. Okay, Chris, the question I've got for you is fairly specific. And this is a perfect picture for it. So the area of special concern, area O, there is a section near the south side on Airport Road where there is a irregular section that juts to the east of the road. Yeah, that area that you've got in your map. Why is that area being selected and not the rest of the property on that side, given the way the rest of the boundary was drawn?
So that was one of those, it was kind of hard to pick one way or the other. So there's a really large parcel behind those that goes all the way to the Pudding River. It's topography, there's a pretty large hill there, and then there's the area close to the river, and so it compared to those 3 parcels, the front, right on the highway, it wasn't, there was a few parcels that seem like they're a little bit further removed in terms of development that would be related to the airport. We kind of tried to look at each one and, what the conditions were there, and we didn't want to split any parcels in drawing the boundaries.
Okay. And then on the west side, not nearly as much property is being selected as on the east side. What's the rationale for doing that in the area west of 551?
So those, the parcels just don't extend back quite as far. So the one that we just talked about that goes all the way to the Pudding River, that one does extend even further than the rest of the ones to the east. But the parcels to the west just aren't as deep as the ones to the east. So the primary, each of the parcels to the east on Airport Road, the front part of those are, they're right there on Airport Road, and they're fairly flat. But probably the further back on those parcels, if those had been split, they might not be in the area.
Okay. All right. Okay, I think we're good. All right, public testimony time. All members of the public on the call will be unmuted and asked if they wish to testify. If you wish to testify, please respond when asked, and you are unmuted. If you emailed comment, please state that for the record, and staff will read those comments into the record. And then just a reminder for the audience, that if you do wish to testify, that you do need to fill out a testimony card either physically or via email. Do we have anybody that would like to testify?
Mandy, can we start by finding out if there's anybody, is there anybody on Zoom or on phone that may wish to testify on this item?
Do you want me to ask them? Is there anybody on Zoom that wishes to testify on this item? Please raise your hand. I have no attendees raising their hand at this time.
Okay, and I don't see any evidence of anybody in council chambers that wishes to testify.
Did we receive any testimony cards for this item? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify? I just wanted to double check, triple check.
Thanks, Miranda.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Chair.
it. All right. Does anybody see a need to continue the public hearing until a future date? Seeing none. Okay. Declare the public hearing closed at 6:35. Is there any discussion between the commissioners that we need to have prior, or wait, testimony is presented before or after a motion is made? So we need a motion.
I move LR 22-0003 and attachments.
Did you mean LP?
Yes, I'm sorry, LP.
Okay. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Discussion.
I have nothing. No additional discussion.
I was going to ask you whether or not that rewording on that last item of the recommendations met with what you were questioning.
I think it's good enough. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I guess I get to restate the motion. All right, so we have a motion to approve Resolution LP 22-0003 and the attached amendments. Ms. Pinyard, will you call for the vote?
Olive Gallagher.
Aye.
Cameron Mesbah,
Aye.
Chair Haberlein,
Aye.
Brianne Tusinski,
Aye.
Andrew Carr.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, great. One down, one to go.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll do this one right this time. Sorry, had to find the resolution. Okay, resolution number LP 22-0002, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville Planning Commission recommending adoption of the Frog Pond East and South Master Plan and related comprehensive plan text and map amendments to the Wilsonville City Council. This public hearing is open at 6:38 p.m. Staff, please present the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Haberlein and members of the commission. I'd like to do a brief introduction. I know that the project team has prepared a comprehensive report out this evening on the master plan, so I will hopefully be brief and not repeat a whole lot of comments, but I would like to start just by marking this moment. It's a really important moment in the chapter of the City of Wilsonville. It's an important moment for this commission. We've been working very hard on this project and on this master plan specifically for the past year and a half. However, the work has been long coming before that. Before that, we've dealt with a number of other housing projects, and frankly, I went back and wanted to pull the dates to make sure I had them accurate, and Frog Pond West came into the metro urban growth boundary in 2002. So here we are 20 years later. Frog Pond West is under development, and East and South came into the urban growth boundary in 2018 after about a decade's worth of work trying to bring that land into the metro urban growth boundary. And here we are tonight considering a master plan to follow on with the great area planning work we did before. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that, acknowledge the hard work of all of you on this commission for many years, as well as the commissioners before you. And it's a very exciting moment. So I'm excited to introduce the team tonight, led by Daniel Pauly, Planning Manager with the City of Wilsonville, and I will let him introduce his excellent team who's with him here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bates-Schill. So again, Dan Pauly, Planning Manager, and with me in the room tonight is Joe Dills with MIG, who we've gotten to know well as here in the room we have Scott Manser and Jenna Bogert with DKS and Associates, and online we also have Andrew Parrish with MIG. I believe that's the whole team. And also from the city side, we have our city engineer, Zach Weigel. So big thanks to that whole team and big thanks to this commission who has listened to me a lot talking about this for quite a while. So thank you for your patience and your thoughtfulness through this whole process. And Samya Kinney from Walker Macy is online as well. So can't not mention Samya. She has done so much for what is before you this evening as well. So to start, I'll give a bit of introduction, a lot of kind of the overview of the master plan. I'll turn it over to Mr. Dills for that, and then I'll come back and kind of go over some of the updates since your last work session, which I was not at, but I've thoroughly reviewed. So we'll start with the master plan overview, and want to acknowledge this great watercolor that was put together showing potentially what an artist's rendition of what it may look like. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Dan, and good evening, Commissioners. I'm going to go through a summary of the plan. This will be a bit of repeat for you. I'll try and highlight a couple of things of emphasis and that may be new in the updated materials, and also give the essence of it for those that are online and in the audience too. The composition of the master plan is from, in the chapters listed here, it's comprehensive in the sense that it works from vision to implementation. And we've done that thinking about how private sector development will occur and how public sector development will occur, and importantly, how the two come together to create a community. Go to the next slide, please. So just a note about the planning area itself. It's outlined in yellow on this slide. And we talk about the south neighborhood, south of Advance Road, as including the future community park and Meridian Middle School. They actually are inside the urban growth boundary, as you know, and inside the city limits, but they are so integral to the whole area that they're referenced throughout the document. Next slide. Per tradition in Wilsonville, there was a lot of outreach in a lot of different ways. Our theme was create many ways to participate and make them all as meaningful as possible. So at the small group end, we had focus groups with stakeholders that are normally in the process, but also ones that weren't, with affordable housing interests and people who are, English is not their first language, and various other focus groups as well. We did online surveys and a variety of different public events, from popsicles in the park to open houses where people could come to the school and look at displays. Next slide, please. I think Miranda gave a good overview of the history. This gives you the milestones along the way. The city's been pretty thoughtful about going from big picture to specifics in the area plan to this now the second of the master plan efforts. If we go to the next slide, then a little more detail about various studies that have influenced those milestones. So the city updated its residential housing needs analysis, and then later on went to the equitable housing strategic plan and the middle housing project. And this really shined a new light on residential uses and the kind of policy approach that would be part of the recommendation that's before you tonight, along with all the other things going on at the city about diversity and equity and inclusion and so on. So a lot of different policy perspectives coming together in the Frog Pond East and South Master Plan. Next slide. On the left side of this is what you will read if you pick up Frog Pond West and the area plan and kind of the foundational policy approach to creating livable, walkable neighborhoods. And you can literally see it coming up out of the ground in Frog Pond West. We had great feedback from the new residents that are there and participated in the process. And then on the right is how some of those additional studies have influenced this new work. The engagement has always been inclusive, but we kind of tried to take it to a new level. And you can see the references to the housing studies and emphasis on variety listed as well. Next slide, please. The area itself, we did a lot of background studies. This is one of them on the right, which was simply a comprehensive tree inventory. And so trying to designate which are the significant trees, which are the ones that may not be quite as significant but are still important to consider as development occurs. It's all been part and parcel of the mapping. This was in combination with a buildable land inventory and the other kind of base studies that were done to make sure that we had the base maps correct. We did a housing and a market conditions set of studies. This is one slide out of the housing affordability analysis. It really gave us a picture of the different types of housing that serve the different income needs of the community. From the left-hand side, the most affordable, kind of the public subsidized end of the spectrum. At the right, what you see throughout most of the city, which is middle and higher income, detached housing, and some attached as well. And really, it's kind of the right-hand side of this spectrum of housing, from 80% of median income to and above, that we're trying to fill a new need and at least provide the opportunity for people to get a first home or maybe a little more affordable attached home in these two new neighborhoods, along with all the other choices of detached and various sizes of lots.
I would add at the same time, making sure all the regulatory barriers are removed for any of these other projects that otherwise get funding or ideas that are below 80%, that there's no regulatory barriers in the way of those.
The next slide shows the commercial side of the analysis that was done. The market assessment looked at the area within about a half mile of Frog Pond. As you know, back in the area plan, it was identified the possibility for a neighborhood commercial center, and the analysis here reinforced that there is a positive market for it over time. The metrics of that are listed on the slide. The vision for it really is that it's a Main Street kind of gathering place for these neighborhoods and for the adjacent neighborhoods as well, as pedestrian friendly as possible. We're realistic that these are not a model you can go out around the region and find a lot of them. It is really planning for the future and trying to take advantage of Wilsonville's particular location here that's along Stafford Road, which is a little different compared to some of the other expansion areas. But it may take some time for this vision to come through, and it is part of the plan. Okay, the design concepts. This is one of the slides that we made. We started with where do people want to go in these neighborhoods? And so there was kind of a clear arc of places ranging from the Grange to a potential new park in the east neighborhood, Main Street, the middle school. You can see them all circled here. And that really started to kind of emerge a set of destinations in the plan that we then carried through in the land use and the transportation work. So that was one of the concepts we looked at. We go to the next slide. This slide indicates an early idea for what are called subdistricts in the master plan. They are neighborhoods within the neighborhoods, so that if you live within Frog Pond East, there's actually a bit of cohesion to the Stafford Road side of it, the middle part of it, and maybe the eastern part of it as well. And that same with the lobes that are up along Colley Road, and you can see the rest of them here as well. Over time, these may take a little different shape, frankly, that have been drawn on the plan here, but the idea is that there is a more neighborhood-specific level within these neighborhoods in which the walkability and the building form are all planned around. We'll go to the next slide. Here are some of more the land use plan type of components that emerged out of this thinking. The reference to form-based planning is what the colors indicate. So the dark brown is what we call type 1 urban form. Those are the larger buildings, the more closely spaced buildings. If you're going to build apartments, that's probably where they end up. But there will be townhomes and other types of housing as well. The goldenrod color is type 2. It's the next level down of housing types, and then finally the pale yellow is the type 3. So you put them all together, and the idea is that there are places where there is most compact housing, and it's an intentional design so that it feathers out throughout the neighborhoods, and that it's distributed throughout the neighborhoods.
Yeah, I want to note that this is a marked difference, and oftentimes when you see a land use map for residential, oftentimes it's either, the different colors would represent different types of housing, like multifamily or single family or whatever. That's in a lot of jurisdictions over the last 50, 60 years. That's what the colors mean. Traditionally in Wilsonville, oftentimes they've meant units per acre, the density that's allowed. These colors are neither of those. They are really about the form, things, and we'll get into kind of what sets that form. But within that form, there's a wide variety of housing choices that are allowed that meet that form.
Okay, next slide. And here's some of the standards that would sort of bring that into reality. And this is a checklist for what you'll be working on after this adoption process, which is the development code and the more detailed implementation. Next slide. A couple of images that we've used throughout the process talking about variety in the neighborhood. So on the left is a little cutout of the east neighborhood. This is thinking about the variety of housing types at sort of the neighborhood or sub-district scale. So you're looking at about 8 or 10 blocks of land here in which there'd be a whole variety of housings. The code and the master plan also aspires to do it at a little bit more granular level. So at the block level or at some form of close to it, the variety of housing types are mixed up. They're not all multiple blocks of the same thing, and then the next housing type, and then the next. There is some intentional design work that is trying to get at the granular level. This is a little cutout from Villebois, where they've done that as a, basically at the lot level through the master developer kind of framework. Next slide. A little site study for the Main Street. So on the left is Stafford Road, and through the middle of the drawing is Brisbane. This would be the extension of Brisbane as it comes out of the west neighborhood and continues to a set of blocks and buildings in which the master plan calls for vertical mixed use. So buildings in which there are shops or services on the ground level, and on the upper floors there is residential. There would be offices, I suppose, allowed also above. But it's a place where you can go to get a cup of coffee, get some services, and really it's the neighborhood commercial center for all of the neighborhoods, but located in the east neighborhood. Next slide. The public realm planning is shown as a list on the left of this slide, ranging from trees to parks and open space, on down through the transportation and street tree and lighting and gateways kind of level. One of the city's real kind of benefits of doing this kind of master planning is thinking ahead to all of these public investments, so that if we're trying to make a very safe and intentional way for kids to get to school, we kind of know what street we want them to walk down and how the sidewalks will be placed, where the bike lanes are, and how that all comes together to get that particular outcome. And you can think of that in terms of open space and all of the other pieces that is done here. There's a practical side to this. You know what lighting standard to buy and store and maintain over time. And so that's what the public realm planning serves as a role in the master plan and as development occurs. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through the street cross sections, not in detail, but really just to show that there's this level of detail and make a few points about them. For Stafford and Advance, Stafford being an arterial street, Advance being a collector street, this is one option for the cross sections here, and it's the one that's been drawn for Stafford. And you can see it's basically a boulevard kind of composition with lots of trees, a planted median in the middle. And the idea here is that the travel lanes are next to the center median, and the bike lanes are on the outside of the planter strip, the sidewalk side of the planter strip. We've coordinated with TVFNR, and it will not be a fully continuous median. It'll be broken for about 50% of it so that you have the ability to pull over, or they have extra room for their equipment should there be an emergency service kind of situation. So that will come to be in the more design, implementation, and the engineering, but it's part of the concept. The second option is where the bike lanes are placed next to the travel lanes. They are buffered bike lanes, so if you're riding in that bright green strip there is a separation between you and where the cars are, but as opposed to being next to the sidewalk, it's intermingled with the street, which is the typical configuration. These are proposed as options because we want the city engineer to have some flexibility in site-specific use of them. So this might be a little bit more appropriate up by the Grange, where we have less land to work with. And so that's why they're proposed as options in the plan. Let's just go to the next slides. If you can picture 60th today as it comes north and meets Advance Road, we'll stand there and look north, and that road will continue into the east neighborhood in a boulevard configuration like is shown in this cross-section. We go to the next slide. This is the urban upgrade of 60th itself. We're looking north here so that the community park or the school's frontage would be on the left. And so it has buffered bike lanes and the travel lanes, an extra wide sidewalk on the west side, so that you can follow a 12-foot sidewalk, actually all the way from the BPA power easement south, all the way south of the school properties as a main walkway. And then in text in the plan, there's a number of traffic calming features that the team has listed that will be incorporated into the design of this street. One example being a center median where pedestrians can stop if they're at the new crossing where Southwest Hazel would meet 60th. Next slide. Pardon me for going fast, but I'm kind of giving you the summary version of this. The street design for Brisbane Main Street, we've talked about this very intentionally as a pedestrian-oriented area. So the code will require buildings to be close to the street. You can set them back if you have a cafe or something with some seating, but intended as a very walkable kind of area with curb extensions and so on. Next slide. So let's sort of summarize some of the policy direction to the code. On the housing side, there are 6 strategies that we worked on over the course of 2 or 3 meetings, I believe, in your discussions. They range from listing the wide variety of housing types that are allowed throughout the neighborhoods, putting those into categories so that you can pick and choose from them if you are developing a particular property, and then setting some rules for minimums and maximums so that you end up with that variety. And so this is the policy direction, the set of strategies. Yes, there are a lot of levers to pull in this particular approach, and it'll take some brain power to work out the final code for it. But it is one way to get some assurance that the variety that is intended for these neighborhoods has a clear and objective way of being defined. There'll be some flexibility in the public hearing process and the discretionary guidelines and so on. But this is the approach starting from the clear and objective outcome for a variety of housing. Next slide. On the commercial side, I mentioned a few of these types of standards: vertical mixed use, buildings close to the street, up to 4 stories along the main street. That will be the tallest part of the neighborhoods. Everything else, I believe, is 3 stories or less. Dan can correct me if I didn't get that right. But you can see where the commercial is going from this type of approach. Next slide. Transportation, the streets have been classified. There was a traffic impact analysis that backs up this work. So this is actually the 3rd analysis over the years to verify that Stafford Road would work in a actually we'll call it a 3-lane condition with the ability to turn. And same thing for Advance as basically a 2-lane street with turning capabilities. What the master plan updated was a set of roundabouts at Collie, Brisbane, and 60th as the main traffic control measures, and then a series of pedestrian crossings that are very intentionally described and detailed for along these more major streets. And then, of course, the local street network that'll occur throughout the rest of the network.
Something I'd add on, particularly on the traffic study, Joe, is that as we talked about, the area plan and all that, so the transportation modeling has for years assumed development out here. So this was really an update to that prior modeling, not dumping all these houses into the existing model. So, I mean, we planned, as we've looked at forthcoming transportation projects, there's been assumptions for years that there will be more homes out in this area.
Okay, next slide. The water system has been laid out for its looping and for its pipe sizes and its connections to the existing system, and even thinking outside of Frog Pond itself, where a northern connection over at the end of Frog Pond Lane will be needed someday. So comprehensive water system analysis and layout. Next slide. Same thing for sanitary sewer. Not all of the area can be served with gravity, so there are small pump stations that have been thought about their location and their catchment and are part of the plan as well. But ultimately, everything gets to gravity and gets to the main trunk line that is in Beckman, and then ultimately the Beckman trunk sewer upgrades. Next slide. Stormwater is the 3rd of the utility layouts that has been done. This is probably the most guiding and least specific of the 3, because it really depends on individual master plan developments. But the city's priorities for low impact development applications as the first priority, and then what you do if you can't accommodate all of the storm needs beyond that, working down to the possibility of regional facilities. That's all described in the technical memo and in the summary in the master plan. You'll see a green line there along 60th. That's indicating the opportunity for a swale type of approach there that would work well with the park and the school properties as that street is built. Next slide. I think I'm getting close. Okay, so over to Dan.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that great summary. So the commission had some great questions and comments, as well as there's been additional staff and partners reviewing, technical partners such as the fire district reviewing this since the last work session, as well as planning commission, city council having a work session. So there's a number of updates that just wanted to step through and highlight some of the chief ones. there was a lot of great discussion last work session about Stafford in particular, but that kind of brought into all of these edges, or the edges between urban form types, and because we talked about this feathering, right? Feathers don't have abrupt edges. So really putting some language in there to talk about, we need to develop standards about how those transitions happened at these edges of different urban forms. So that language has been added. We had some great technical review of the street tree and lighting. That's all been updated based on that technical review, and appreciate those reviewers. Something that we've talked about in work sessions but wasn't well reflected in the last version of the plan is existing homes, and kind of understanding what's likely, what could stay and not be redeveloped during the foreseeable timeline of this plan. So this includes some of the older homes. We've talked to a couple of them. Some of them, even though they are really old, may just not be salvageable based on structural elements. Really the only one we've had in-depth conversations is this one built this first one built in 1900, where we know, for example, this one on 60th, which is from 1920, but it's been highly modified, probably in the 60s or 70s, noted that. So besides these older homes, there's also a lot of new and high-value homes in this area that may not be demolished. Some of them were just built, as you see, a few years ago, and probably will be there for 20 or 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And so we've noted that. So that's kind of a known quantity as we look at development. And that likelihood to redevelopment is also being considered as we look at infrastructure planning and funding. Special design locations, this is where the discussion, particularly around Stafford, and how do you transition from the 4 stories at Brisbane to the 2 stories across the street and to the other adjacent areas. So really acknowledging that there are some special urban locations for urban form that we really can think of. This will probably be, and we haven't defined, but I foresee that this being a combination of clear and objective as well as some discretionary guidance. Some particular areas are along Stafford, which we've talked about quite a bit. Having that friendly face from Stafford is also adjusting height and form to really transition from that main street to what's typical for the type 2. Also Advanced Road, having eyes, making that really a friendly street. Again, we use that term, but really having front doors to the street where it seems, not just a walled off thoroughfare, but somewhere where it has traffic calming, where there's pedestrians, and is really a pleasant place to be, as well as around parks. We talked about really having active doors and such on the park, so you don't have, again, walls along the park. And so those areas, we will continue to think about what are those things, such as entry orientation or special treatments of materials for walls or fences that may be necessary to really tie everything together. Joe alluded to this earlier, but we added some specific language about the history of the Meridian Creek Middle School project and site and the adjacent school-owned sites, as well as the future community park, and that they are integral and are kind of throughout the plan are referred to as part of the plan, but they're actually not technically part of the plan since they're already in the city, have been previously planned and annexed. We got comments from the property owner about potential history of this treed area south of Colley Road. And so just a note has been added that will be reassessed, really look at the understory, kind of determine, is that like an old tree farm or something that really there's no substantial habitat value within there. So maybe that may end up being homes rather than as it's mapped now as resource area. So with that, the staff recommendation is to approve all this great work that the community has done on this, to recommend approval to the city council to adopt this master plan document, which also includes comprehensive plan, map, and text amendments for the master plan area, as well as approving the list of corrections and updates. I had it sitting here, I meant to say this earlier, but the papers that you have tonight, just want to go through those briefly, happy to answer any questions you have about them, and we have the appropriate people here tonight to do so. The first one is I'll start with the memo from myself. There's a few things from city council that they wanted. They wanted just to define what master planning is. We throw those terms out quite readily in our field, and just in this specific context, what we're actually doing. And that's really language we pulled from kind of the front language of our outreach language on Let's Talk Wilsonville. The engagement summary, which is an important part, there's some additional editing there. Some other clarifications. Back to, I did want to highlight, because this is contradictory to what it says in your staff report, is talking about adding discretionary review of development for specific urban design contexts. The staff report and the master plan currently say discretionary. We're really looking, as I just stated a few minutes ago, really looking at that more probably being a blend of clear and objectives as well as discretionary. So we're kind of taking that discretionary language out to give more leeway as we go through that. Some other details that were previous comments from the city engineer that didn't make it into the master plan, so continue to highlight those. You have the addition of the notes from our collaboration with TVFNR about making emergency access on Advance and Stafford. There was still a list of street trees for the main street, which we've gone on to suggest deleting. Really, the idea is here, as explained, is traditionally in master plans, like in Vilbois and such, we're pretty detailed on the street tree list. We found that that's not a good idea because, have things like ice storms and climate change and or weather pattern changing that really make that tree we listed as a great idea back 20 years ago is not such a good idea now. And so be able to reference the current city list that has the latest varieties that may come up and the latest knowledge about how trees are responding to current conditions. There was a specific request from council about clarifying for the Grange building. I do want to mention the Grange building because, that is, let me step aside, kind of note that really how the master plan handles that could potentially be a great amenity over the years for this master plan area. Currently, it's really, the plan treats it as is, assumes it's going to stay as is. That may, ownership may change over the decades. But if there is any future, this just noted that if there's any future public ownership of the Grange building, it's dependent on whatever future funding may be, which hasn't been identified at this point. There are some good points made in our council work session about side yard usability based on some lived experiences, particularly in Vilbois. So some ideas to really direct us as we do our code writing to think carefully about how we direct side yards so we don't end up with, with useless weed patches that are using up valuable land. And those are the highlights of the recent updates, which I'd suggest or recommend that you include in your recommendation this evening. The other letters, there's one from the Clackamas County with some feedback, particularly around transportation. I will note that the city has been collaborating with Clackamas County for some time on a lot of these issues, and we have our city engineer as well as Scott Manser here to answer any questions about this. But this letter doesn't really reflect the true collaboration that has been happening. So I'll leave it at that for now. The last one is from Tim O'Brien, who's the principal regional planner at Metro, who has been the grant administrator and a key partner as we've worked through this. So his current comments, really in support of the plan, acknowledging that we still have that work to do on infrastructure funding implementation, which we'll be bringing back to you early next year. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you have at this juncture.
Thank you.
Or is there anything else, Attorney, that I forgot to read into the record, or good? Okay.
Dan, I have a question about the trees.
Yes.
Of course I do. When you say that you want to avoid the list, is there going to be, we have had discussions around the tree canopy and preserving trees. So will that still be in effect in the master plan?
Yeah, we're still preserving the trees. This is, rather than saying this current variety that's out there on the market, it's very specific, that's what we're going to put there. Really, instead stating what the intent is, we're looking for columnar trees that have fall color, that are really resilient in urban areas. Things like that, talking about kind of the form of the trees, and then at the time of development, and then also talking about how much variety of a tree do you want on that street? Do you want it all fairly uniform versus really more a natural look and mix? And clarifying that, and then at the time of development, the landscape architect can work with the city off the current list. Let's say it's 15, 20 years in the future of what that best tree would be.
Right, I'm just concerned about the preservation of the...
Certainly still preserving all the existing trees.
Because we've seen in other neighborhoods how that has gone the wayside when developers come in and just go, well, we'll take out those 10 pines, and it's,
Yeah, and certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Also acknowledging that, some trees that look great now, we've learned this, that, I've seen trees that had been preserved for 10 years during a master plan, and they just fall over one day as we're getting ready to develop. With no fault, developer didn't do anything, but they just, trees are living things, and sometimes they do fail. So the conditions can change over time, but the intent is those trees identified here as preserved, every attempt will be made to preserve them.
I have a question based on the Clackamas County comments.
Before we get too far, sorry, I want to hear that, Commissioner Tusinski, but before that, I do want to enter those letters appropriately into the record as under the appropriate exhibit number. Is that okay? Yeah, so since we're going to talk about them.
And I actually had that written down. So we have our 4 attachments that are already with the staff report, which is attachment 1's the Frog Pond East and South master plan document itself. Attachment 2 is the technical appendices. Attachment 3 are the findings for consistency with local, state, and other standards. Attachment 4 is the record, which is just a couple of pages long. Attachment 5 would be the memo dated today from staff. Attachment 6 is what Commissioner...
I believe the letters would be a part of attachment 4.
Attachment 4, yes, would be added to that record.
Correct. So the letter from Metro and the letter from Clackamas County will be entered into the record as part of attachment 4.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead, Commissioner Tusinski.
So I just wanted to touch on making sure that the improvements that are proposed and as designed in the cross-section will be able to accommodate the most likely significantly increased traffic from both the plan that we've created and also people bypassing the proposed tolls on I-205. Will it be able to accommodate that increase?
Short answer is yes, but I'll let our experts speak to that.
Good evening, I'm Scott Manser with DKS Associates.
Hi.
So to answer your question, I think you're primarily looking in the location adjacent to the Frog Pond development?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've looked at our 20-year analysis, looked at the full growth of what's planned in the urban growth boundary and with the Frog Pond development. And the cross-section that Joe went through will provide our long-term.
Okay, and is that also taking into account then the people that will be bypassing 205? Because I know that that's going to add a lot of people to that road.
Yes, so our analysis, the tolling study is still, are you referring to the tolling? And yeah, they're really, that's one of the questions that we have back to the county. If there's been work that's been done and really where the tolling is and what the impacts are. We're not expecting an increase in traffic from the tolling on Stafford Road.
Okay, good to know.
And maybe you can comment based on other communities' conversation, essentially if there are improvements that the tolling triggers, the tolling, ODOT's essentially on the hook for them, more or less?
Okay.
Yes, so as part of that analysis, the impacts that are created by the tolling will be addressed through that tolling and the funding from that.
Okay, great, thank you.
There is another aspect to the whole tolling question. If we end up essentially building an I-5 through Wilsonville for the bypass, we are defeating the purpose of reducing congestion by pricing congestion. So I don't think Wilsonville should start expanding all of its roads in order for I-5 to go through Wilsonville. That would be disaster. And it seems to me that with the traffic calming that's happening here, this is not going to be a chosen path for anybody on I-5 because it'll back up all the way to the I-5 exit. Oh, he left. I thought maybe I was hoping that he would speak to that.
Oh.
Please.
Can you make sure that microphone is on as well?
Is it not working?
Can you speak to the strategies about on this issue of diverting traffic from I-5 because of tolling?
Yes, so that's a great point. One of the reasons of the design that we have and having roundabouts, we want to slow traffic. We want traffic really to serve the Frog Pond development and serve Wilsonville, not to be an expressway for cut-through traffic within the city. And so we have, designed the roads and come up with design components to discourage quick cut-through the city. Does that answer your question?
It does. Do you want to speak to the whole idea of induced demand by just having capacity sitting there waiting for bypass?
Yeah. I'm not really sure how you want me to or what you're getting at, but I guess, one of those things that if you build a big, wide facility that's going to be fast, it's only going to encourage cut through.
And you're inviting it, in other words.
Exactly, you're inviting it. It's there, and by creating a quicker route, you're taking that capacity and basically traffic travels just like water in the path of the least resistance. And so if you make bigger streets, faster roads, then you're going to encourage that demand from other facilities to come use this facility.
So back to what your initial response was. You have two ways of addressing this. One, accommodating it, which you just said is just going to invite more traffic from I-5. The other one is to create disincentives. Is what you're expecting to hear from Clackamas County, their assessment of what the likely routing will be of that traffic and how to calm it and provide disincentives? Is that what you're hoping to get?
Yeah, I think really their point is they know there's going to be traffic in this area for Frog Pond. There's going to be traffic that is going to head north on Stafford, and they want it to operate in a safe manner. And they've done some corridor studies, and the city is partnering with future safety improvements to make sure that facility is safe, not necessarily that we build a big wide street for an expressway. So I think their focus is more, they want it to be safe for Wilson residents and other residents within the area to travel on Stafford Road.
Thank you.
And that's what we're trying to both achieve.
Thanks.
My concern was the fact that they said in their letter to us, in addition, proposed I-205 tolling will add a significant amount of traffic to Southwest Stafford Road and will bring some intersections along the corridor, such as Southwest Stafford Road, Southwest Mountain Road, close to capacity. So now they're asking us to be concerned about something that's way outside our area of influence. And that, how can we, I don't even understand why they would say that to us.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't want to speak for Zach, but I mean, he's had conversations with the county too, with the same question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Good evening, Zach Weigel, city engineer. Yeah, so we're in conversations with Clackamas County about regarding the content of their letter and working through some of the issues. It really does come down to what Scott said, is about their concern for safety for the corridor, and we are partnering with them on projects that aren't within Wilsonville, like 65th and Ellickson and Stafford. So it is a little, I would say, strange to ask for us to analyze a intersection that far outside the city.
Yeah.
But like Dan mentioned, and maybe Scott can speak to this, we're not adding new traffic in the model, right? This has always been accounted for in the model, and what the county's capital program or their transportation system plan is addressing, so.
Yeah, and anything above what maybe prior models assumed is de minimis.
Right.
Right, and I think people that were going to do this as a bypass would hit Ellickson and turn, and then go aim for I-5, right? So that's the bypass. They're not going to come all the way into Stafford and advance. That wouldn't be a bypass for somebody that's trying to cheat the tolling system. Right, so now we're on to the last bullet, or the fifth one, that whole Ellickson 65th Stafford mess. Right. But they're saying, prior to approval of our master plan, we need to mitigate the traffic impacts. Mitigation of traffic impacts should be identified, including funding mechanisms with approval criteria tied to capacity of intersections within the influence area of the master plan.
Yeah, and
so they're asking us to solve their problem?
Well, we are working with them on that intersection currently. We're in the middle of planning a temporary signal at that intersection for construction of the Beckman Bridge. So we are also coordinating with them on future, the ultimate future improvements on that intersection, and helping to fund some of that work. So that coordination is happening.
Okay. This almost sounded like this almost sounded like Dad calling me out to the woodshed, saying fix it or I'm not gonna approve this. So, because I know we need them to approve this. So,
right, we do not. Right.
Yeah.
But we are continuing to work through, the issues that they brought up.
So I think that Commissioner Carr said something, and Zach agreed with him, but I just want to make sure it's clear on the record that they don't have approval authority necessarily on the master plan.
Right. They do not.
They do not.
Well, how come they imply it in this letter?
Exactly. So.
They're not saying that they're they're saying prior to your approval of the master plan, we're hoping that you're going to take care of these things.
Got it.
I'm not reading that they're saying they won't approve it. So you're not going to the woodshed.
Got it, okay.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah, not yet.
Here they come for.
I knew we'd have to work through that letter. Anything else on that letter? Thank you, Zach and Scott.
Well, the only other thing in that letter is, as you're talking to the county, I think, one of the assumptions they're making is, they mention I-5 here. The only way Stafford is going to be a bypass for I-5 is through Wilsonville Road and up through those neighborhoods to Stafford. I mean, that's really circuitous. And if that happens, I think you're going to bog traffic downtown. So in these conversations with the county, I think this idea of whether we are to accommodate this bypass or try to discourage it should be nailed down early on.
So, Mr. Polly, I believe you are done with the staff report, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does the commission have any additional questions for staff regarding the report or the additional memorandum, which will be attachment 5? All right, it's up to me again. Okay. So a couple of follow-up questions based on the discussions that we had from, I think, the last session. So the pictures, the options 1 and 2 for the street segments still show high voltage power lines running through Stafford and Vance. I know that was a question that was brought up at our last discussion. Has there been any additional conversation about the feasibility of putting those high power lines underground?
I mean, we worked through this on Beckman as well. I think it's more, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more an advanced question than a Stafford question? Or it's both? Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, if it's at all feasible, that's what we're going to require, and we have city code to do so. But if it's just, you'd have to like cool it with water or something underground, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll say we're going through this on the Beckman Road project right now, and we can't underground those high voltage lines. So you can, it's $10 million a mile. And that's at the city's cost. So like Dan was mentioning, they do have to have cooling systems. It generates a lot of heat. So they are very expensive to underground. So I would say we do have a very good example where we just went through this on Clutter Road where the developer undergrounded everything that was overhead except those 3 high voltage wires, and it looks pretty good. I mean, it's when you're just limited to those 3 wires and they're very high, it actually is a lot less noticeable than what you see out there today.
Okay, thank you. All right, stormwater map. There was a discussion last time about the stormwater sections. I think down one more slide, Dan. Yeah. The section K1 versus K2 and the difference, the rationale for having K2 as a separate area. Any additional thoughts on that?
I'll note we have Mike Carr from our team on the line as well.
So I have some thoughts, but I'll let the engineers have first shot at this one.
Mike, you're going to need to unmute.
He's unmuted on Zoom, or he was.
Give us a sec to get the audio connected.
We cannot hear you.
like, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, K2 from topography can't drain to any regional facility where K1 does.
That's right.
Can drain to regional facilities. I think that's the key difference.
But it's pointing the same direction. The drain line is pointing east, just like K1 is, towards Cruz Creek.
So can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question from the last meeting was, why are we designating K2 as a different stormwater basin than K1?
All right, it's because K1 needs to discharge at the top of the creek basin, so you can see the outfall. They have two separate outfalls is the short answer.
Okay.
We can't dry up the Cruz Creek basin by not putting the outfall at the top of the creek there. So you can kind of see the two outfalls, one on K2 and one on K1.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that works.
We're seeing head nods and thumbs up from Mike also.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you, Mike. And then the special design locations slide. So there is specifically the area on Advanced Road. So on this picture, the way it's identified, you're showing a special design location on Advanced Road, specifically on the north side, and having that facing Advanced Road. The concern I've got with that is not that side of the road, but the south side of the road. So are you saying that in the area east of Southwest 60th, you would have the north side facing the road, but the south side not facing the road, potentially having backyards or side yards directly abutting Advanced Road in that area?
Well, it's a built condition really on those. That's where a lot of those homes that probably won't change during this period are. And a lot of those do actually front on Advance, but I think it's a fair point that maybe even west of 63rd, that little portion, making sure any development there faces north on Advance. So that's a fair point to update.
So then we would have to add
We could add that to the corrections letter too.
So we'd update the memo to add the south side of Advanced at.
You can just say the south side of Advance, assuming
South side of
the
Advance.
areas that won't redevelop, it's a mute point, so.
Okay. And then on the memo itself, the first one, and specifically the text somewhere in chapter 1. Can we get any more clarity into where you think that would go?
So it's essentially a formatting thing. It's something that we want essentially as early as possible, but it may not, I don't want to, throw their formatting work and InDesign into disarray by saying it has to be in this one spit. So essentially I wanted to give the formatters leeway to put it where it fits within that chapter, since it'll be kind of a standalone call-out box. I mean, if anyone here from the design team has a spot that says, it'll for sure work right here, I mean, that's great, but I couldn't readily identify a great spot for it.
We'll try and fit it to page 2. It does have a little bit of a domino effect, but if we could have the flexibility of either page 2 or 4.
Page 2 or 4.
We'll make the layout work.
Do you want between pages 2 and 4?
Well, page 3 is a whole page map. So.
Okay, so 2 or 4, all right.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay, I was just asking.
Yeah.
Page 2 or 4, okay. I can get behind that. I think that's all I've got. Anything else? No. Okay, so it looks like we can move on to the public testimony side. I need to say all this. Okay, so our call for public testimony, all members of the public on the call will be unmuted and asked if they wish to testify. If you wish to testify, please respond when asked and you are unmuted. If you emailed comment, please state that for the record and staff will read those comments into the record. Before we jump into things, do we have anybody online that has requested to comment?
Does anybody on Zoom, would anybody on Zoom like to comment? Please raise your hand. I have no attendees raising their hand at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. And could I get a show of hands for people in the city council chambers that would like to testify?
I have a question. I've never done this before, so I just have a question. Does that mean I'm testifying?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, can you get one of the comment cards and fill that out, please? Thank you. Okay, so we've got 3, so I'm not going to worry about a time limit, although I will ask people to be succinct where at all possible. Okay, and as a reminder, anybody who wants to testify needs to fill out a comment card. Looks like we've got 2 with a 3rd on the way. That's good. And then a reminder for people testifying that they will need to state their name and address for the record, or you can state that your address is as provided on the testimony card for the record. All right, I'll go in the order that they were handed to me. B13, next, B13. Dean, I apologize for messing up a last name. Dean Sprecher? Sprecher. Thank you. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, or you can state that your address is as provided on the testimony card.
Yeah, Dean Sprecher, 5696 Southwest Advance Road, Wilsonville. Is that it? Ready?
We're ready.
All right.
Go for it.
So this is nothing new to our family, this whole proposal thing. We've been kind of in it from the beginning, and there's been some things that have been proposed and some things that have been changed. And, you know, and if you guys are recommending approval of the resolution, I don't know exactly how far that goes, but there are questions that I have on some of the maps and some of the legends, I guess, and markings on the maps. One being in particular the conceptual trails along the UGB, urban growth boundary. So when the Frog Pond plan, the first one was implemented, there was lots of maps that were shown. There was a, lack of a better word, hiking trail that went from Advance Road south along right up against the urban growth boundary. If you look at the pictures on some of the maps, especially the one with the conceptual trails, there are trails that go from east to west through the properties, but deadhead at the urban growth boundary. Why do they deadhead at the urban growth boundary? What is going to be along there? Is there anybody here that can answer that?
I am confident that staff can answer that question.
Okay.
And if the engineering team has anything to add, I'd welcome them. But a couple kind of basic concepts is, first of all, they are conceptual. So really, in terms of the transportation network, the only things that are really kind of set in stone or fairly in stone are like what we call the framework streets, like 60th, Brisbane, kind of the streets where we know they're going to be because they naturally lend. All the other kind of internal streets is illustrated kind of the size of blocks that we're aiming for, but that's not set in stone. That's going to be determined at the time of development.
Gotcha.
And then why they did, that's something that, I mean, the engineering and just from city standards in general, even if it is somewhere that's not going to redevelop, we'll always try to take it to the edge so it doesn't stop future connectivity, even if it's decades in the future.
Yeah. See, and that's the question I have, because on the original Frog Pond plan, there was a trail that came right down basically my driveway. Okay, and now there's these lines that go across in the back. So, and I did notice, and I looked through the book here pretty good, that they're planning on doing that trail down 60th now. Is that correct? Or will there be more than one trail out there?
The main connectivity from kind of the regional trail system would be down that west side, the
on
west side
60th,
of 60th. Yes.
Or along the urban growth boundary?
The west side of 60th.
So you guys no longer have the plan in there? Because it was, I have a picture of it somewhere that shows there was a trail going down my driveway.
Yeah, those would have been conceptual, so the current plan is that main trail. I mean, there may be local trails, you know, connect a small pocket park to another small pocket park or something like that in the future, but for that main kind of regional trail that connects up to the whole city trail system and essentially connects up from the BPA easement down behind Meridian Creek Middle School to a future trail that will likely happen that would go across the creek over to where Beckman Creek Primary is. That main connection would be down 60th.
Okay. So I was reading some of the paperwork and it says something about annexation. So is annexation required in this plan, or will it be required?
No, annexation would be the same as it's historically been in Wilsonville with our other master plans, be it Frog Pond West or Villebois or others, is it's at the request of the property owner when they're ready to develop.
So I have a choice whether or not I want to go in to even be a part of Frog Pond South, correct?
Yeah, be part of the city. So
part of the city. So
yeah, it's essentially the standards are there for whatever time you or a future owner decide to do something with the property.
I read something there about force of law, and so I don't know. That's the curious. What brings to mind is, you know, eminent domain, something like that for like a trail or for. And that's why I asked that.
No, great question. So essentially what it means is, when you do choose, or if you do choose to come into the city, you can't go, you know, build something completely different. You need to comply with this plan.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's no force of coming into the city.
Okay. So the only other thing that I would
I mean, there could, and I mean, there could be, if they're like widening the right-of-way or something, there could be, you know, right-of-way purchased or something like that, but.
See, that's what I meant for like, if they're considering a trail, a right-of-way or not, that would be just.
But if there were a regional trail, it could be, in that specific case, there's no planned regional trail that, at this point, I'm aware that would trigger any.
Okay.
Thing like that.
So back to the other thing, the special design location, that would be directly across the street from my house. And so what we're talking like right now, from what I gathered, there will be a 4-story building sitting on the other side of the street from my house.
2-story.
That was 2-story.
1 to 2
1 to 2-story.
Okay. And where were the 4 stories planned? That was just up on the corner on Stafford and Advance?
Brisbane and Stafford.
Brisbane, which is just around the corner,
Yeah,
which is the proposed road.
Yeah, about 1,000 feet, or the first crossroad.
Past the church.
Yeah, above the church, that first new crossroad in Frog Pond West is Brisbane.
And so that's going to be 4-story buildings along Stafford?
No, on Brisbane.
Just on Brisbane when you turn onto Brisbane. But that's basically, that butts up to Stafford. So would the end of that building be 4 stories, right?
There could be some, but I mean, that's what the standards about how that transitions, because this panel has discussed in the past really about, we want to be sensitive to that transition from the 2-story that's on the other side of Stafford to a more intense. And so on purpose, a lot of the potentially more intense development is kind of somewhat internal to the area, so the edges are blending better with surrounding development.
So then that's going to lead into high-density housing right there and off of Brisbane? Is that what kind of the plan is?
So Brisbane itself would be likely ground floor with like 2 or 3 stories of apartments above.
That's what I'm talking, yeah. Okay. So, you know, and a couple of other things, you know, and to speak to the traffic, you know, Wilsonville traffic is a disaster, right? And everybody knows it because I know people in other states that know about the Wilsonville traffic. And, you know, when you were talking about not going down Stafford Road, that's not going to happen. I mean, all you have to do is come up where we live on any of those streets on Sunday, you know, afternoon, Saturday afternoon. It is packed. Everybody comes off the freeway, and all you're going to do is screw up people like me because if you put in roundabouts and all that, it's just going to choke the traffic down to where I can't get around. You know, it's just a disaster. Even just putting the traffic light up at the end of Stafford Road there, you know, it's like I don't understand why somebody can't put a flashing yellow light on the left-hand turn lane when you're headed south on Stafford so I can turn on Advance Road. You know, I don't know what channels I go through to speak to somebody about that because, you know, it's, you know, I've lived there almost 20 years. I've lived in Wilsonville area since 1966. And it's just, you know, there's like, if you can't even handle that at that intersection or whoever's in charge of that, how in the heck are they going to handle the other stuff? They don't even take that into consideration, you know? So I guess that kind of sums it up. I am a little frustrated about the traffic up there. So where do I find like one of those books right there, or where do I get that information at? Because I looked online and I cannot find that stuff.
What book is it?
How would I get a copy of this, or how would I get?
I can email you the packet.
Okay. So I think I put my, did I put my email address on that? No. I put it on one of them. So, I put it on the check-in.
Okay.
So.
What we got?
If it's on there, we can email it to you.
Yeah.
We can get that out to you in the morning.
All right, well, thank you for listening to me rant, and, you know, and we will all be notified of future meetings and stuff, right?
No, the public notice that went out was for this hearing as well as the city council hearings. So tonight's recommendation will be, depending on what the planning commission does, the action they take tonight may or may not be a recommendation to city council, and then it would go to the city council for a public hearing. It is tentatively scheduled for December 5th, depending on what the outcome of tonight is.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
And Dean, thank you for your comments. I guess the one thing I would say is if you have traffic concerns, the city engineer would be the right person to talk to specifically. Zach, right behind you. All right, next up, Mimi Dukas. Would you please come forward, state your name and address for the record, or state that your address is as provided on the testimony card.
No spiders, right?
No spiders this time, thankfully. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mimi Dukas. I'm with AKS Engineering. I'm here on behalf of West Hills. I've been before you several times now, and we want to say thank you for incorporating much of our feedback. This is the first of a longer chapter, and we know that there is a lot that will still need to be worked out in the details on the implementation side. We think the concept plan allows us to move forward with those implementation components and be able to build the community that West Hills has in mind. That being said, we do want to be on the record on a few things, just to avoid any confusion moving forward. So we believe the plan reflects the ability to do a 3-story structure, those garden-style apartments along Stafford Road, subject to some design refinements that we're expecting to see in the implementation measures. So we think the plan reflects that, but just to confirm. And then the other area that we want to clarify is the retail along Brisbane. The intent for us is to build ground floor retail available space and then residential above. We heard from City Council, and I think we've heard from Planning Commission. Retail is a very tricky land use. There is a lot of retail that doesn't work. There are a lot of areas that don't support it. Our expectation is that the buildings along Brisbane will be designed to a commercial standard so that they can accommodate commercial. We'll do our best, but there's still the ability to have it be residential in the interim, so that we don't have vacant storefronts, we don't have vacant space along your Brisbane frontage. And it gives the area time to mature and grow into that retail. There are a lot of rooftops with Frog Pond West, but there's still a lot of rooftops that we're expecting to come in that aren't there yet. Retail really needs those rooftops in place before retail has some life and some dollars moving through the economy. So again, we mostly want to be on the record. We think that's what the plan is communicating. I think the language saying up to a certain square footage of commercial mimics what I'm describing, but just want to be on the record. Other than that, thank you again for listening to us, and we'll be back for implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Mr. Pauly, can you confirm or deny Mimi's thoughts on third story along Stafford and the retail flexibility?
I think her statement reflects what conversations have been had with this commission, and we're exploring the exact language, but certainly the record supports having some flexibility there.
And if I may, Chair Haberlein, I would point the commission to page 107 of the master plan, and specifically to number 9, and it starts on the bottom of page 107 and continues on page 108. You'll see new language there that refers, that tried to capture the conversation that was had at your last Planning Commission meeting, and the desire to make sure that there is a good transition between the Main Street and the Type 2, as well as the adjacency across Stafford Road and the primarily single-family two-story buildings that are on the west side of that road. And so we tried to capture the fact that when we get to implementation and the design of the code standards, that we want to be intentional about those areas in that transition. And it provides the guidance to us, so that is providing the policy guidance that we heard from you. So if you do have a moment in this hearing to scan that and make sure it captures that, we would appreciate that. It does mention, a couple examples, one being the potential for 3-story buildings along Stafford as you make that transition. And then there was another example of buildings with step backs to provide the transition between the area adjacent to the park and then the Type 2 that would be adjacent to that Type 1 area. So we took some time to really think about where those different areas of transition occur in the neighborhood, not just along Stafford, but throughout the rest of the neighborhood. So that's where that language can be found. I believe we have more public comment. Okay,
yes,
perfect.
One more. Sally, and I'll let you state your last name.
I'm Sally Bainey, 28901, I believe the address is on Southwest 60th. My neighbor, which I don't know, I've never met you, but we're neighbors, I think. A lot of the questions that I had, he brought up. I was wondering, since I've never been through anything like this before in the city of Wilsonville, I'm wondering if there's a human that can come out and walk our property with us to help me figure out what's going on, because I also had questions about the pathways that connect, the school, it must be Meridian Creek School parks that come through the corner of my property. And then I don't really know how to read some of the artist renditions of specifically the water, how the water drainage, the green, everybody was talking about green lines that looked like it went through my property, but I don't know how to read it very well, so I'm like, oh, goody. So, and then I have a question too. If I'm on my property, I would say I want to be incorporated into the city of Wilsonville. Is that how it works? And if we say no, then it's like eminent domain where when you widen 60th or footpaths through. I don't know how that works.
Good questions. So as we stated, it is, and certainly we can arrange for site visit or otherwise something to really help you understand what all this means for your property. Happy to do that.
Thank you, that'd be great.
I can be your contact for that.
Okay.
In terms of, there, similar to what I said previously, there may be, I don't want to say never, just to keep it out there. I mean, there could be a scenario where the city would work to acquire like edges of your property for 60th or something. We haven't determined that that would be the case or anything at this point. Otherwise, the way the city works is when either yourself as developer or you're selling to a developer or enter into a purchase agreement with a developer to purchase a property and develop it, it all happens concurrently at the same time. So they're getting kind of approval of their subdivision and annexing it to the city and rezoning it all at the same time.
Okay.
So until that time happens, it is what it is today.
And that's when the connections to facilities would occur. So I think one of your questions was about water or sewer. So it's at that time of annexation and development that the improvement of services to urban standards would occur and the connection to city standards.
Okay, I was more concerned about, and maybe I misunderstood because I don't know this world, but it looked like a drainage. The green, like my neighbor mentioned, it would help to have one of those books too, where you're not like trying to see. And when I walk through with,
was it this map? All right, I will confirm on
yeah, that is. And okay, am I supposed to be over here at this? Like, is that my property right here? That green thing going through there?
So for the record, I'm looking at page 123 of the master plan, which is the proposed stormwater system. And these, again, are improvements that would occur upon development. And so stormwater would need to be managed when there's new development and new impervious surface, and that's the system that would be put in place to help appropriately manage that stormwater.
So I think, Sally, one thing we can say is that wouldn't be necessary to build until your property develops. It's not serving other properties.
Oh, okay, that's what I was wondering, like, yeah, okay, I got it. All right, thank you. Thanks a lot. That's everything I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. All right, so Ms. Simmons, unless there's anybody online that has raised their hand.
I have no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, great. Commissioners, is there any follow-up questions to staff about the public testimony before we close the public hearing? All right.
This question of eminent domain has come up. In some municipalities, when you go to urban standards for streets, if one side is annexed and the other side is not, you do one side of the street and leave the other side rural until that other side is coming. Is that how we do it, or we do it in Wilsonville?
Yes. And And so there may be situations where it is, we call it a three-quarter street, where essentially they build every 3/4 of the street enough for two-way traffic and all the sidewalks on one side and the other side is just a curb or left for future development. There may be a scenario where some of, like 60th in particular, where the whole thing needs to be built at once as a city project. So, I mean, there's always, I don't want to say that never happened to be built both sides, but typically it is the three-quarter street.
So 60th may be different? Is that why you're kind of worried about 60th?
In terms of the funding and needing to build it earlier because of the infrastructure that's going to need to go under it. So we'll get into that in the infrastructure funding, but I'm just probably thinking into too much detail and brain's working into too much of a rabbit hole right now. But the short answer is yes, typically we do the three-quarter like that.
I don't want to put you in a place of over-promising, but for those property owners who are worried about eminent domain of the upgraded 60th taking their land, even if they're not yet in the urban, annexed into Wilsonville, perhaps clarifying that or maybe doing some research to have a more definitive answer may help them. Although even in that case, I can see, two properties above and two properties below annex, and you're the only property that's not annexed. Well, I mean, that side of the street for all practical purposes has been annexed, and I can't see that you would build that upgraded 60th with curb and gutter and not just leave 140-foot or 100-foot width of a property in rural, if that happens. But that's probably not the way it's going to be developing.
Yeah, and Commissioner Mesma, let me clarify, is what I'm trying to do is not overpromise that, there could be a scenario where eminent domain could happen, right? I don't want to say that it never, ever, ever happens, but it's, in these sorts of development scenarios, it's fairly rare. I don't know what you...
And I suppose I would add clarification on the record is that when we do acquisition of right-of-way, there is a process that occurs with the city and fair market value is paid. So
it's rare that we just...
It's rare that it... Right.
We try to buy it
typically,
first.
development like this happens as land annexes and the improvements are built as a part of the construction of that development. We don't always go out and do the right-of-way on our own, although there are examples of roads in the city that we have gone out and acquired the right-of-way, paid fair market value for that right-of-way to the property owners in order to build a facility that was needed in advance of the development happening. And that is a process. We will be going through the infrastructure funding plan over the next 6 months. We will be having conversations about the framework projects and what we think the timing of those might be. So if anyone in the audience is interested in better understanding that and whether one of the roads that's adjacent to them might be a part of that conversation, Dan would be your point of contact, and he would be able to provide you with notice of those conversations and when that will be coming in front of the Planning Commission.
As a follow-up question, I would imagine that conceptual trails, this would not apply to. I mean, you haven't condemned the property for a trail, I assume. No. Really? And certainly nobody's driveway.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So the conceptual aspect of that map is just that is kind of where that is going to be, but you're going to look at where the logical place is as development happens, and it's going to be where it makes sense, not somebody's driveway.
Correct, and part of making sure that we put those on the map to show future connections is acknowledging that we are living and operating and putting a plan together for this point in history, and 20, 40, 60 years down the line, the community will look different and potentially grow, and what is currently outside of the urban growth boundary likely won't always be outside of the urban growth boundary, just like this neighborhood. And so back when the city had prior developments, we showed connections up through the Beckman corridor, recognizing the importance of that and having a regional trail that could connect up to the north. And now up to the north is existing neighborhoods in the city of Wilsonville. And so those things become much more formal as then those areas actually end up in the UGB, and then we plan for them, and then we're able to delineate them. And so right now what we're showing is that we don't want to have this community not be able to have some of that interconnectivity and permeability with areas that may in the future someday end up in the urban growth boundary as well. So we want those connections to be made, and we want the ability for that to happen. They're conceptual until the time of development and until the time that those other adjacent areas are added to the UGB.
And a third follow-up question for staff is the timeline with all of this, and you started it. Some of the apprehension is people who've lived here for 20 years are worried that next year they're going to have a 4-story building within their eyesight. And what I heard was it took 20 years for the west neighborhood to develop, and we're just starting here. And so those who've lived here for 20 years have another 20 years. And by then, probably you're ready to sell. But who knows? You have a choice even then, right? Is that correct?
Correct. And timelines are always uncertain with this world that changes all the time. So, I mean, depending on the market, it could be slow, it could be fast. Certainly, indications are it'll start kind of in Frog Pond East along Stafford, and that will probably be the first areas to develop. But again, following this infrastructure funding plan, that's the key piece, because you can't build until the infrastructure is there, and infrastructure is not cheap, and understanding that that progression of the infrastructure will be key to understanding the kind of the timeline of how the neighborhood will develop.
Thank you.
All right. I am going to close the public hearing at 8:13 p.m. Before I solicit a motion, I wanted to read what I believe the motion should be and get clarification that that would be acceptable to staff. So as I wrote it down, I see the motion would be to approve Resolution LP 22-0002 with the addition of 2 letters to Attachment 4 and the addition of the November 16th, 2022 memorandum as Attachment 5. Attachment with the revision to clarify page 2 or 4 instead of somewhere, and to add the south side of Advance to the special design locations. Yes.
Excellent.
All right. So I move to approve Resolution LP 22-0002 with the addition of 2 letters to Attachment 4 and the addition of the November 16th, 2022 memorandum as Attachment 5 with the revision to clarify page 2 or 4 instead of somewhere, and to add the south side of Advance to the special design locations. Yes. Okay, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Is there any discussion with the commission? While you're thinking, I will provide some commentary. I want to thank staff for all the hard work on this plan. This has been a heck of a lot of effort. While Dan was going through this, I was trying to think of the number of times that we've met to talk about this, and likely the number of staff hours required to put this all together. I know it's been a heck of a task, and really appreciate, again, all the hard work that you do to make excellent plans, which is why we have an excellent city. So thank you.
I guess
Andrew, is your mic on? Is your mic on?
Oh. My random thoughts are back to this Clackamas County letter. I'm bothered by the way they worded this. I do have some assurance that we are working with them, but I was concerned with this. But I also echo your comments about staff and the amazing job that was done and all the work that goes into this. But yeah, that's my only commentary.
And it's not like we made it easy for them either.
Well, that's our job.
It is.
It is.
That's why we get paid nothing. Anything else? I'm not seeing anything. All right, so time to vote. I guess if we'll just do the roll call. It's easier that way.
Just to clarify for the record that was, the resolution was LP 22-002.
0002.
Okay, thank you very much.
3 zeros.
Excellent, thank you very much. All right, on to the good stuff. Roll call vote. Brianne Tazinski.
Aye.
Andrew Carr.
Aye.
Olive Gallagher.
Aye.
Cameron Mesbah.
Aye.
Chair Habeline.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, wow, okay, next agenda item. All right.
Ms. Pinyard, I may have missed this, and forgive me. Did you call Commissioner Tazinski? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, informational, any staff comments? I know there's no staff presentation for the City Council action minutes or the PC work program for this year and next.
No, I do not have any comments on that. I have one other item, though, unless, that I'd be happy to move on to unless you guys have questions on either of those items. All right, so I did want to take just a couple minutes to acknowledge both Commissioner Tazinski as well as Commissioner Woods, who is not here this evening, but I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge both of you this evening, as we are not going to have a December commission meeting, given the fact that all of you have committed 2 extra meetings just over the course of the last 2 months. You get to enjoy time during the holidays and the winter months to not have to come here to City Hall and meet with us again. So since we won't be here in December, I did want to just take a moment to acknowledge all of the time and effort that both of you have put into the Planning Commission over the course of this last term. It is not lost on me that there are 1,000 things that you could choose to do, and you choose to volunteer your time to serve your community. And that is a true gift and a value that is immeasurable. You've given a lot of countless hours to reviewing packets. I mean, the packet before you tonight was 3,000 pages. I'm going to assume you probably only read the first 500 and skipped the record, which is fine because that's just meant to go on the record. But still, that's an enormous amount of work to review and come prepared for and be thoughtful about, which is what both of you have done over the course of your service. It shows a great amount of care for the place that you live and the people who live in this community, and so I just really want to thank you for that. The work that we do in this room is really important work. Sometimes it feels like we're slogging through, but we're setting policies that directly impact the lives of the people who live here and work here, and that is really important work. And so I just really want to thank you for your time and your thoughtfulness in doing that. And I really hope that you enjoyed your time in service with us, and that you take away from this an amount of pride for what you have done and given to your community. Brianne, I feel like what you've often brought to this process is I've felt you, I've heard you put yourself in the shoes of people who live in this community, and really try to think about how would that impact me in their shoes, and try to be that voice and champion for the members of our community, both in how they've participated in the process and what they've said, and also how you think it might affect them moving forward. So I just want to say thank you, and I wish you the best in whatever your next adventures are, and what service you do, and hopefully we will see you here again in some shape, way, shape, or form, maybe at that microphone testifying.
Maybe. I'd like to say thank you to everyone on the Planning Commission and also staff. It's been a great learning experience and a privilege to serve the city, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. So I do have a plaque and a thank you card, and we do have some treats that I expect everybody to partake in after this meeting. We have a lot to celebrate tonight.
Great. And Commissioner Jasinski, thank you. We've really appreciated your insightful commentary and thoughts, and it really does show your attention to detail and not just going through the motions, but actually looking into it and really putting forth that effort. So it's been greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
We're going to miss you. All right, I think that was it. All right, Commissioner Jasinski, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
All right, we are adjourned, 8:21 p.m.